Most husbands hate their wives. They do. I danced for 4 years. I stripped for 4 years. I danced from 2011 to 2015. I know everything there is to know about men, okay? I've never been naive to the bullshit. I found out male nature for what it was at 19 years old. Never been married before. Don't want to ever be married. Don't ever want to have children. I've just seen too much. I know men too much.
I'm about to be in trouble with the sex workers, the men who pay sex workers, and the pick-me's for this one, but sweetie, you don't know male nature. You know the nature of men who would frequent strip clubs and pay for sex, and only you, it would seem, would expect to meet good men in that line of work. Hey guys, I'm Hannah Cox with Base Politics. Welcome to my channel where I bring you my politically homeless takes on politics and culture. Before we dive in today, make sure you like this video, subscribe to my channel if you have not already, and of course, ring that notification bell so you never miss one of my episodes. Guys, I said I was going to be in trouble at the top because I already am on Twitter. After viewing this video on TikTok, I wrote the following over on X. I wrote, I really hate the dumb trend where sex workers come on the internet to tell us all the things they've seen, the true nature of men, why they don't want to be in relationships with men because of their experiences with them, on and on it goes. Like, sweetie, I don't know why anybody has to spell this out for you, but no one but you would think you're going to come across good men in that line of work. Yes, obviously, most of the men you were around were dirtbags and cheaters and hated their wives and didn't respect women and were abusive. The good men, the devoted husbands, the stand-up leaders are never frequenting strip clubs or otherwise using sex worker services. As you can see, as of this recording, we are at 2.1 million views and 32,000 likes on that post. RIP to my mentions. People have a lot of feelings about this. I really honestly did not expect this one to hit a nerve, but it did, and I stand by it. Now, I think I know why this post hit a nerve, and we're going to talk about some of those reasons today. But among them, I think a lot of men felt defended by it. As this guy said in my comments, damn, I feel defended. Thank you. If I had said that, well, never mind. And I think that's true. I think a lot of men have been hearing this dialogue and feeling very maligned and smeared by it. This trend really is all over. I could pull multiple videos from sex workers that I have heard discussing things like this, and I just think it is abysmally stupid. I have to play you a little bit more of the original video before I can fully get into everything I want to discuss today.
My father has also been very honest with me about male nature, and just with him being honest just with his own lifestyle, and just how he operates as a man, and even the men that he surrounds himself around, how they operate. And one thing that I noticed at the strip club is that all the married men would trauma dump on me about their wives, how they weren't attracted to their wives anymore. A lot of them lose attraction for their wives after they have children. They start to feel very neglected after their wife has children, and a lot of them complained about how they their wives let themselves go. They're fat, they're overweight, they don't look as pretty anymore. They bicker a lot, they fight a lot, they nag a lot, they complain a lot. And I think that this is very important information for a lot of women to understand and know, because I'm
gagged. The fact that she comes on here and says, my father let me know about his character, let me know about the character of the men that he was running around. Like, sweetie, you were a stripper. I'm sorry, but I would anticipate that your father was also a dirtbag. I don't like blaming women for the sins of their fathers. I hate that kind of diss that people try to use against women who do end up in sex work or other promiscuous positions where they essentially blame them for having like bad fathers or absentee fathers. That's not their fault. It's the fault of crappy men. But the correlation is certainly there. Like, if I actually have a story about this. When I was 18, living off in Clemson, I went to Clemson my freshman year, or I lived in Clemson. Anyways, long story short, I had a good friend that started waiting tables at Hooters, and I was waiting tables at Outback, and we were comparing tips, and like she was making triple what I was making. So I started eyeing that Hooters job like, this might be a good idea. And I kind of tested the waters. Like I mentioned to my family that my friend was working at Hooters, and my father was furious. And he was like, where is her dad? He ought to go pull her out of there, buy her hair. I ought to go pull her out of there myself if he's not going to do it. Like, what kind of father would allow his daughter to work in a place like that? And that's when I knew like I would not be working at Hooters. So yeah, the fact that your dad also sucked, and the men that he has surrounded himself with sucked, because like attracts like, you become like the people you're around. That does not surprise me. But that doesn't mean that everybody had a crappy dad like that. You understand that, right? It doesn't mean that everyone's father was a bad man or surrounded themselves with bad men. It's just that you had the unfortunate circumstance of being born to a man like that. On to the worst part of what she says there. The men who complain about their wives, though. This made me want to barf. Like, I had a visceral reaction to hearing that. Petulant, fragile, low IQ man babies would do this kind of thing. Like, you're going to go cry to a stripper because a woman who you took a vow before God to marry and be faithful to, and who then had children for you, is not up to the same physical appearances she was at before she had the kids. Like, are you kidding me? If she let herself go, it's probably because she's too busy taking care of your ass and the kids she birthed you to take care of herself, you absolute moron. And then when she said that they would like whine to her about how the wife put the kids first and they were in second place and they didn't get as much attention anymore, like, this is actually something I do know happens. Like, I hear men admitting to this online. I see therapists talking about this problem within men, but like, that is phenomenally abysmal. Like, ugh, gross. I could not even be like friends or in the same room as a man who thought that way. If you have kids, not expecting to be in second place to them, like, you shouldn't be a father. I don't know why this is something that it just seems mothers innately understand, that when they have kids, they will be in second, third, fourth place, depending on how many they have. And yet men expect to still be treated like the king baby when there are kids to take care of. Like, that's just ridiculous. Their wives are not having sex with them because they are disgusting. Like, who could possibly be attracted to a man who thinks and behaves like that? Like, I promise you, just because he's not saying these things to her and he's running to a strip club and telling it to a stripper instead, does not mean that the wife is unaware of the type of creature she's dealing with. In response to this conversation on Twitter, another sex worker said, "My years as a sex worker taught me that men are very emotionally starved people. I don't say this in a boohoo male loneliness, woe is them way, but even I am still incredulous how many men would pay just for emotional intimacy. Men would book champagne rooms just to cry." And somebody quote tweeted her and said, "Yeah, and I'm sure those men who pay a sex worker to cry to are all being 100% honest about their problems, and their wives are total bitches and they're just poor innocent little babies." Another person said, "If men actually made the effort to find out how to make sex enjoyable for their women, they'd have a lot more sex at home." Like, I have zero sympathy for these unevolved males. I don't even have, like, you can't even call them men. Like, this is some kind of primate. Like, you are just so stunted if you were in this position. Instead of working on themselves and their marriages, they go and whine and cry and cheat. And they can't even cry to a therapist, which would actually be cheaper because of their tiny egos that have them convinced it's less socially stigmatizing to cry to an 18-year-old with an unformed brain in cheap lingerie versus a doctor who has studied the brain and might actually confront them with some accountability. So yeah, I understand that in your line of work, you encounter the absolute lowest of low of the male species. Like, these guys are fleas on humanity. I can't even listen to your stories about them without getting hives. And I guess I'll agree with them on one thing. Women certainly do need to be aware that men like these exist so that they can vet them and avoid them. But I would say, I think that's likely already happening. I think that's why you see women being pickier and pickier. That's why you see the birth rate declining. And I don't think that that will improve until the men do, because the men who are going to behave like this, women are learning better ways to suss them out beforehand, and they are avoiding them. And that will continue. And that is a good thing until this kind of species dies out. Only the men who are fully evolved men who like and respect women, who are going to do their part in raising kids, deserve to have families. But my problem with her and others in her camp is that she is taking these facts about the type of men that she encounters in her line of work and applying them to all men, which is quite obviously not the case. This is like asking a bartender if most people that they meet are alcoholics. The answer is going to be yes, but your sample size of the population is skewed. And look, I'm not expecting most people who are in sex work to be like absolute brainiacs or pillars of intellectualism, but to think that the sample size of what you're dealing with is representative of the entire male population is just so bizarre and weird to me. But again, This is their line. People repeatedly tried to say this to me on Twitter in response to my post. This is a well-known sex worker on Twitter named Aya. I think is how you say her name. I don't really know. Don't care. But she said, probably you have friends who see sex workers and aren't telling you. And I said, I keep seeing a lot of people say this in the comments to my post, but it misses the entire point. No one is saying that they don't know any men who frequent sex workers. We're saying those who do are mostly bad people, certainly if they're doing it behind a spouse's back, and that therefore the pool of men sex workers are encountering is not representative of the general public. It's not that we are never encountering bad men who pay for sex. It's that sex workers are only encountering bad men who pay for sex. Here's another sex worker who said, it's hilarious how people think good men don't seek out sex work services. Sweetie, half my clients' wives swear their Joe husband is a saintly father, ethical politician, or devout priest. Meanwhile, those same men are booking me. And she put like laughing emoji faces. And let's not even start on the request, getting pegged, dominated, or just wanting a hug and some emotional intimacy they clearly don't get at home. The duality is wild. And I said, you have to be pretty dense to read what I wrote and come back with this. No one is saying that we are never encountering bad men who pay for sex. It's that sex workers are only encountering bad men who pay for sex. And your response just continues to prove my point. Like, the mic is not being dropped, sweetie. The point still stands, as this person said to me on Twitter, and I agree with, there are millions and millions of guys who wouldn't hire a sex worker, especially while married or partnered. You're only seeing the ones who would. Why does this have to be spelled out? But I'm telling you firsthand, and I'm sure we're going to see it in the comments here, alleging this fact, saying that there are good men in marriages and otherwise out there, enrages both the sex workers and the men who pay for sex workers because they need to believe that everyone is in the mud with them. Another person to me on Twitter said, I don't know. I don't think the good men versus bad men is that black and white. Pretty sure that many good men whose wives have absolutely no idea frequent sex workers too. Not all, but certainly some. The my husband would never trope has been often proved wrong. I said that definitionally would make them a bad man. It is that black and white. My friend Spec Cohen said, we live in a time when, quote, good husbands and boyfriends don't hire strangers to have sex with is somewhat controversial of a take. And like, the sex workers just kept proving my point over and over and over. Here's another one. Hannah, I often like your takes, but this one falls quite flat. I am a sex worker. My clients are good men, devoted husbands, and stand-up leaders in my community. No, they aren't. No, they aren't. What are you talking about? Who do you think you're gaslighting here? It's just yourself and your clients. Hiring people to have sex with, especially when somebody is in a committed relationship, is simply not the behavior of a good person. I would argue that good people should avoid participating in the sex work industry altogether, because I think there are a lot of consent issues with it. I think there's a lot of trafficking that happens. I think it's very harmful for the women who participate in it, even when it is consensual. As a libertarian, I do not believe in outlawing it. I've actually argued against criminalizing these fields. I think all you do when you do that is create black markets, create secondary, more harmful effects, put the women themselves in more danger, because I think if it were above book, there would be a better ability to vet the clients, to vet their health records. Like, it's not a pleasant thing that exists, but making it illegal doesn't help anything. That being said, it should not be incentivized, it should not be celebrated, it should not be normalized, and it should not be excused, particularly if you are in a relationship and doing it behind your partner's back, because then you are putting your partner in danger. You are removing their ability to consent. And good men know this. I'm sorry to break it to the people who want to believe that nobody is above participating in this, but that is simply the truth. As this guy Branson said to me on Twitter, as a married man, I wouldn't attend a party if I knew there was going to be strippers, and if I was unaware and there, I would leave. Another person said, no respectful or high-value man goes to strip clubs or sees prostitutes. Yes, agreed. Like, high-value men have no need or desire to do this. This guy Brian said, Hannah, this is the sad truth that most people don't understand. If you are sleazy enough to go to a sex worker, then you are not honorable, faithful, trustworthy, etc. Men will try to normalize sexual deviancy. Men who honor their wives would never do that. And while a lot of sex workers were being defensive, some of them did agree with me. Here's one that said, I second this. I used to be a bottle girl at a strip club, and the only men that go there are the ones running away from someone, something, or themselves. And I agree with her. Men who have control of themselves, men who have their lives together, men who respect themselves and who respect women are equally grossed out by these fields. And I want to clarify, because I think some people thought that I was like posting this with absolutely no nuance. I'll give one example. This person said there's a nuance here that nobody is mentioning, which is the nature of business and doing business in a male-dominated industry, especially at the upper end of the hierarchy. It's kind of a peer pressure that exists, but is not usually easily admitted to females. And I acknowledge that. I don't think that it's super masculine to be peer pressured. I think most men, like I could think of like my father being put in that position, and like there's nothing you could say to him to peer pressure him into going to a place like that. But I said in response to him, I think there's a difference in someone that gets dragged into a strip club for business or like on a bachelor trip. And I've even had that happen twice in my life. Once when I was at Mardi Gras, I got like pushed into a strip club because you're just like sardines down there in the street and you can't move. And one time I was in Nashville and out with a bunch of people, and they all insisted that's where we were going. And I was like a broke college kid and didn't have money for my own taxi. And so I ended up at a gross strip club. Both times were like super depressing, super sad. I wanted to like kidnap the girls and get them out of there. Like I hated everything about it. I don't know how you could even find that to be like a sexy environment. It was just gross and really, really depressing. But again, I get that there is some nuance here. I get that sometimes you end up in these situations without really meaning to. And I think there is all the difference in the world between that and the men who actually frequent these businesses, are regular customers, are getting to know the women enough where the women can then go tell stories about them online, and who are actually paying for sexual services within them. Particularly in the context of doing it when you have a partner and you are lying to them about that and doing it behind their back, because that's really what she's addressing in this video. And that's really the point most of these sex workers are trying to make when they're coming online and saying these things. It's not just like a lot of men are coming to our businesses and you would be shocked to find out that people you know are using our businesses. No, it's always a very like pointed sort of dig. Like, I bet your husband's coming to see me. It's very pick me. It's very much needing to justify their line of work and feel better about themselves. There's a whole lot of cope to it. They get defensive and mad in the comments because they don't want to believe that other women are being treated better than they are. Like the whole point, the whole premise of this girl's original video was that your husbands don't like you. And that's even more clear if you go look at her comments and her follow-ups. Like, it's a dig at women because I think there's a lot of self-hatred involved in being in this line of work.
And I think that this is very important information for a lot of women to understand and know, because I just did a video about this, but too many women believe that because their husband hasn't left them, that their husband likes them. And that couldn't be any further than the truth. This is why most of the demographic of, men that are buying escorts and OnlyFans and stuff like that, most of them are married. Most of I always joke around and I always say, there's no man more single than a married man. And the reason why men that are married cheat so much is because they were sold a dream too. They were, through patriarchy, they were sold a dream too. And they were sold the dream that they were going to get all their needs met from one woman. They were going to get their emotional, their sexual, the domestic things taken care of. They were told that they just needed one woman to do that. And then they quickly realized that that's not the case. And we also have to realize that internally, men struggle a lot. Men don't know how to emotionally regulate on their own. They have to have a woman to help them feel comfortable to, emotionally regulate. And so men realize that the vessel can never be filled. The vessel is going to be, it's insatiable. It's insatiable, the need that they have for women and multiple women. And a lot of them don't like their wives. A lot of them don't. Most of them are just tolerating it. They're just tolerating their wife in a marriage because they still get some benefit. They do. They still get some benefit. And also, a lot of men suffer from male character syndrome. A lot of them, they don't want to be the one to bite the bullet to get a divorce because they don't want to be seen as the bad guy. They rather just have the wife file for divorce and be the one that can just take the heat for breaking up the family.
I don't think anything she said in that portion of the video is incorrect whatsoever. I think there are a lot of men who get married for the wrong reasons. I think that is why men are far less likely to file for divorce. I've said this over and over and over in response to the red pill actually, to this day, men still get far more out of marriage than women do in most relationships. And that is why they do not have the same incentive to file for divorce, because they are looking for services outside of a woman merely being their wife in that relationship. They're getting somebody to raise their kids. They're getting a maid. They're getting a cook. They're getting a secretary. They're getting somebody to run their lives. They're getting somebody to give them a social life, because many of them are antisocial and don't have any friends or deep relationships outside of their wives, because they don't have that kind of emotional intelligence and they haven't formed community and they don't have close relationships even with their families. So like, yes, she is right on this point. But again, she is wrong on it being most men. It is the type of men that are coming to see her that are more likely to be in that kind of situation. And I agree. Those men are shitty. Like, let's have a conversation about shitty men and about how to like peg them beforehand before you get stuck with them in relationships or having kids with them. But like, to try to say that it's most men or it's all men or it's indicative of what's going to happen if you get married is so obtuse. I also posted on Twitter, I'd like to see a Venn diagram of the people who say women file for divorce for no reason and are breaking up families because they're selfish. And the people who say most men use sex workers and cheat on their wives, and anyone who says otherwise is a fool who is getting played. Like, you guys, you have to pick one. No one is saying there aren't wolves in sheep's clothing. Women are unfortunately high key aware of that. But what I am saying is that if you're in these lines of work, you aren't even crossing spaces with the actual good men in society. Like, you're not in the same room. They aren't in your family. Your low expectations are showing because you have not had access to better men. And instead of recognizing that the spaces you're putting yourself in and staying in are bad and harmful and expose you to the worst of humanity, you want all women to accept your fate and just mirror all men as being the type who would access your services so that your clients can similarly feel better about themselves. And that's where all this like simping in the comments, like, my clients are good and honorable men, they're decent men. No, they're not. But you both need to believe that about one another to feel better about participating in the industry that you're in. And this whole thing of trying to throw it in other women's faces, like, probably men you know are seeing sex workers, probably your husband will do it. Like, one, no, they probably don't, because I actually have good taste in men. I'm pretty good at sussing this sort of thing out, and I would know it, especially if my husband were to do it. Like, we have each other's locations. We're with each other 24/7. I would find out. And if he did, I would leave. Like, it's not that complicated. And if I found out a male friend or family member of mine were doing that, I would also similarly confront them. Like, I wouldn't just be a wilting like flower that had nothing to say and like no ability to like have a backbone or stand up for myself. But the point is, there are plenty of men out there who are not doing it. And those who are bad people, not even worthy of being like in proximity to me. Like, I don't associate with cheaters. I don't even like having friends who are cheaters, because I think it is a moral failing. Like, that is a character flaw, and it's a character flaw that is not likely to be fixed, particularly once somebody is a grown adult. If you will lie to and manipulate and cheat on your spouse, your partner, the person that you're supposed to love more than anybody, you will do anything. I won't trust you near my dog. And if you are someone, particularly a woman, because I think it's more common to see women do this, but men too, if you are someone who will have sex with somebody who is married, knowing is behind their spouse's back, you are also an unethical, bad person. You have a fatal moral character flaw. Are there some women in denial who have husbands and family members who are frequenting these businesses? Sure. But really, they're usually the kinds of women who are excusing this behavior in the first place. I love that in response to me calling this whole trend out for being as stupid and problematic as it is, some women got very defensive in my comments and tried to accuse me of being a pick-me. Here's one that says, Hannah, don't be a pick-me. I said, a pick-me would be sitting here saying, I don't mind, it's just looking. We both like to go look, actually. Who cares? Which, like, I really do see some women doing this when we talk about these subjects, and I can only assume would be the kind of girl who's triggered by me calling this whole trend out. But you can see just how in their feelings these people get. Again, I'm referring to sex workers and the men who frequent them. In response to this conversation, they were so upset. I want to give you a few examples of the like defensiveness that they came into the conversation with. There was this whole trend where a number of the sex workers were trying to say to women like myself and others that essentially, if you're married, you're a sex worker too, which makes absolutely no sense. As my friend Isabel said, they always assert that wives are actually sex workers too, which is so offensive and demented. Like, it is absolutely not the same thing. When you have sex with your husband, you are doing it because you have commitment to one another. You love and respect and care about one another. You are expressing your love for one another. It is not transactional. Like, girly pops, I'm going to defend your right to work in these industries till the day I die. But like, to come in here and try to justify it in this way, again, it's a cope. And you need to actually examine that, because the only person you are tricking is yourself and your male clients. I also saw this one a few times. This like no-name troll said, "You are a sex worker too, e-girl." I said, woman has successful career in music, then in politics, passes numerous pieces of legislation, builds a media career from scratch outside mainstream media, starts and runs 2 successful companies, and continues to be a leading voice on public policy. And no-name losers like this will still come online and say sexist BS to me in the comments. Like, just because I am a pretty woman in your estimation does not mean that that's why I've gotten where I am. I've actually gotten where I am without ever having to in any way participate in sex work. I don't even post thirst trap photos. So probably I'm just smarter and a harder worker than you are. Point in case, they just so desperately need to bring all women down to the level that they are on because they are unhappy with themselves. The fact is that most men don't cheat, and most men especially do not cheat with prostitutes. Just to pull a little data in here, while some of these things are a little bit hard to calculate, so the ranges are a bit larger than you would see in other statistics, but in the US, studies show that about 10 to 20% of men have paid for sex at least once in their lifetime, depending on the sample and methodology. Older men are more likely to report paying for sex, often due to a higher disposable income and different social norms during their youth. Single men are more likely to pay for sex than married men. And around 20 to 25% of married men in the US admit to cheating on their spouse at least once in their lifetime in any given year. About 4 to 6% of married men report engaging in an extramarital affair, and men are generally more likely than women to report infidelity, but the gender gap has been narrowing in recent years. Are there other problems present the sex workers are touching on, like not respecting women, not working on your marriage when there are issues, marrying for the wrong reasons? Yes. And are porn and other online services a problem that too many men are getting sucked into? Also, yes. But to paint all men with the broad brush these people are using is absurd. The fact is that there are millions of stand-up faithful men who love their wives, who respect women, who would protect their daughters from these industries. And if that upsets you to hear, you should probably go talk to an actual therapist about it, not a stripper. All right, guys, I hope you like this episode. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to my channel if you've not already, and if you want even more content, you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok.